Hello, I'm David Robertson, and this is another educational video from artistblacksmith.com. Today we're going to do a piece of ladder Damascus, or ladder pattern welding. And this bar ended up being about 14 inches long, and we'll start creating the billet today, and we will get started. Here are some samples of what you can do with this technique. Both are ladder patterns. And we'll now take a look at the start pieces to form the billet. So I started with 7 layers, and I'm using high carbon steel and mild steel. There's 3 layers of high carbon shown there, and they get sandwiched between the mild steel. So mild steel, high carbon, mild steel layer, high carbon layer, and a final mild steel layer. All these pieces have been ground both sides so that there's a completely clean surface to attach to. I've MIG welded the ends, stacked them up, MIG welded them, and they're on a long 1/4 by 1 inch flat bar to use as a handle. The handle which I use is about 30 inches long, so it gives me something to hang on to. So my flux is 20 mil team borax, nothing special, you can get it in the laundry aisle. And now we'll get to the process. So I've heated up the stack in the forge. I'm wire brushing it, get rid of as much scale as possible. And this is almost at a welding heat. The camera is a little bit of a trick on the bright lights, so it's actually a bright orange that I'm working at. And I sprinkle the flux on the sides so that it flows into the center of the billet. And I'll do this from both sides. I kind of mash it around with the spoon a little bit. Doesn't require a whole lot. I use perhaps total 2 tablespoons all over the billet. And the flux keeps the oxygen from getting to the surfaces that are to be bonded. It'll also flush out any scale and impurities when I do the weld. So this is the actual weld, and I'm doing the first weld with a hand hammer. You can do this whole process by hand hammering, it is just a lot of work. I'll switch over to the power hammer soon though. I give it another brush, another scrub. It's well tack welded at this point. I'm going to reflux again, and then I would take a second welding heat on it and further start to draw it out. So I'm fluxing at this point, and now all the pockets and seams will have closed up, so I'm really just hitting the surface of the steel and making sure that no oxygen gets into the center of the billet. If you didn't have an electric welder, you could wire these pieces together. I have done that in the past. You have to be extremely careful until it's welded, because it will slide around and then that can spoil your weld. So I'm going to start to draw out. Now this one I'm working with flat dies on the hammer at the moment, and I'm doing an initial surface weld over the whole piece to make sure everything's securely tacked down. And then I will switch over to rounded draw out dies and pull the billet out to a 1 inch flat bar by about 14 inches long. This I cut into 5 pieces for my next weld. So my first weld was 7 layers, and then my next weld is going to be 5 times 7. So in 2 welds I'm at 35 layers. You can see the bars stretching out now. A bit of edge work, and you can see I've got the rounding dies on the bottom of the hammer right now. And I want to stretch this out so that it's about 1/4 of an inch thick, and then layer it again. And I have to take a couple passes with this. I work the tip first, and then I'll work the middle portion, and then the end nearest me. And eventually I'll get it worked into the flat bar. By hand, this is a tremendous amount of work to draw everything out. It is possible. I have done it. But using an air hammer or a mechanical hammer makes this part of the job so much easier. So take your time with the draw out. Make sure everything is an even thickness and an even width, and that your final piece of steel is as straight as possible. And you may have to do some hand work with this. When you're doing pattern welding or Damascus work, you always want to err on the side of cleanliness and evenness. So this is the next stack, 5 individual pieces, again MIG welded. Now I've already fluxed them, and I'm taking the weld under the air hammer here. So welding heat is a bright lemon yellow, very similar to what you're seeing in the video right now. If you're using a coal forge, you can take it up to just before when it starts to spark, and that will be at the welding heat. Once you start getting the sparks going on, you're a little bit higher than you need to be, and you're actually starting to burn the steel. Usually this isn't a problem in a gas forge, but some gas forges run hotter than others. And I am working strictly out of a gas forge with this, and I've had good success with my Damascus. And now you can see I'm just consolidating that, stretching it out, and I'll go back to draw out guys and draw it out again. So I've now notched alternate sides, so the notches are over top of the peaks on the other side all the way along, and this creates the ladder pattern. I've actually cut through the layers, and now I'll end up forging this flat, and I do this at a welding heat as well, and I'll do it in sections over the whole bar. So I'm basically working on the tip right now. And what you didn't see in the photo is that I did another welding, and I used 3 layers. So I had 35 before, and then I did that a layer of 3, so that gives me 105 layers in the finished piece. Now with the ladder Damascus, you're removing material, so you have to allow for that in the beginning. So you need extra height in your stack, extra length, everything. Once I get it forged flat, then I can grind it to shape. I'll do very little forge work to actually stretch the layers out. Mostly I want to cut through the layers so that they're visible. If I forge it out, there's a sample of how the piece turned out. You can see I haven't turned it into a knife at all. It's still the raw billet. The next video I do will be showing how I make a knife out of it. So the next photo is of a ladder pattern that one of my students did, and you can see it's a much tighter pattern, and all they did is put their grooves, their cuts with the angle grinder closer together. They were about 1/2 inch apart. And another sample piece of Damascus is coming up, and this is a twisted pattern, and this is including nickel in the matrix. So it's high carbon, mild steel, and nickel, and the nickel's giving the bright shiny silver line there. There's a lot that can be done with pattern welding. You do have to practice with it. I prefer to cut and polish between each piece, but certainly you could hot cut and fold over. Many people have had good success with that. When you're starting with pattern welding, keep it simple. Keep things clean, grind between your welds, use flux, and then once you get that down, you're comfortable with it, you're successful with it, then look at the shortcuts, like the hot cutting, folding over instead of layering it and welding it. Some people don't even use flux. And these are all possibilities, but your chances of success are higher if you start with the basics. Good luck. I hope this works for you, and if you are interested, there's more information at artistblacksmith.com.